Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We are incredibly excited to have you all here. Today's topic is clearly a big one for the field, and there's a huge amount of content that we need to get through today. So I'm going to get started right away with some housekeeping, and then I'll introduce our guests. The first thing to note is that we are recording this webinar. The recording will be sent out to everyone that is registered. With that recording, you will get a copy of the slide deck as well as a certificate of attendance. We will reference a variety of resources today. All of the links and the downloadables that we reference will also come your way in about 24 hours after we wrap up our time today. Next, there is a chat box available to you in your Zoom window. Take a moment to find it on your screen. Let us know who you are, where you're joining us from. We are an interactions company, so we certainly invite questions. We do encourage comments. If you have any questions or comments throughout the presentation today, send them in. We have staff on hand ready to engage with you. We might hold some questions for the end, but we will do our best to address as many as we can by the end of the webinar. With that out of the way, I'd like to quickly introduce today's panel. I will start with Bridget. Bridget Hamry is Teachstone's Chief Executive Officer and of course the co-author of the class tool. I know many are excited to hear directly from you today, Bridget, so thank you for being with us today. Grace Funk and Veronica Fernandez are newer faces to the Teachstone team. Grace serves as the Senior Director of Strategic Initiatives, and Veronica is our Senior Director of Social Impact. So welcome both of you and thank you. And then finally, we have Katie Twiley, a member of our product team, serving as the Senior Product Manager. Welcome, Katie, and thank you for being with us today. So lots of expertise, lots of knowledge at the table today to talk about Class Second Edition and what to expect as we roll out these enhancements to the tool. Bridget, I will hand the floor over to you to get us started with a poll.
Thank you, Gloria. First, it's always important, as Gloria said, we are an interactions company. It's helpful even when there's so many people joining us to know who is with us. So we're gonna just do a quick poll to understand more about you and what brings you here. So tell us about whether you're a teacher, a leader, a site leader, implementation, sort of systems leader, a data collector, observer, or a researcher. And keep those chats coming in from where you are. They're coming fast and furious. I saw early on somebody from my hometown of Sacramento, California. So shout out to all of our friends and colleagues out in California, but really across the country on this lovely spring day, at least here in Virginia. All right, Gloria, I don't know how long we should give this. Maybe another minute. All right, so here we see lots of leaders, including both sort of instructional leaders and site leaders and broader systems leaders, some folks who are class observers, data collectors, and a good portion of teachers as well. Well, it is exciting to have all of you today. And one of the reasons we asked this question in particular is even though today we are talking about an observational measure, we know over the past 2 decades, really, so many people across the country and across the world have come to use class in their daily work. And although many of you may be observers, you play lots of different roles. And so it's wonderful to have so many roles represented here. As Gloria said, there's a lot to talk about related to second edition. We are not going to give you all of the information nor answer all of your questions today, but there's a lot more information available on the website. And one of the most important things we want to convey today is that we at Teachstone, myself and all of my colleagues across the organization, are here to support you through this transition to fully understand what class is, why we're doing these second edition changes, explore what they mean to you when they're happening, and really to be there as you transition in this important work. So we will accomplish as much as we can in the next 55 minutes or so and look forward to much more. So, for those of us here today, I expect that many of you share our vision and passion around interactions and relationships as being so core to ensuring that children get off to a great start and continue in their great start throughout school. So maybe just take a moment in the chat. Many of you have shared who you are and where you're from, but just what is your why? Why are you here? Why do you care about interactions? What makes you excited about doing the work that is enhancing the experiences that young children and adolescents potentially even have in their classroom experience. As you're doing that, and share, please, continue to look through the chat, see what your colleagues are saying about why I see servitude to teachers, making sure we're supporting all children, speaking to equity, building relationships. They are coming so fast, I cannot read them all. So I look forward to you all being able to look at those as we move forward. But at Teachstone, our mission, if you go to the next slide, is really to help ensure every child reaches their full potential by measuring and improving the interactions that matter most. I expect, this is hopefully not just our mission, but one that many of you share, although many of you have many other things you have to do as well, but really centering ourselves today on interactions and how much they matter for supporting learning and development. At this sort of pivotal moment for class, where we're going to talk about a new addition for the first time to class, I just want to take a moment to thank each and every one of you for the work that you've done over the past couple of decades. Before we started this work, when we said the word quality, when the field said the word quality, we were often talking about whether a teacher has a BA degree. Well, now we know that although education is absolutely important and we want to make sure we professionalize our field, there's nothing magic about a BA degree. And we've seen incredible educators doing incredible work across the education spectrum. We used to talk about ratio as being quality, or just the materials in the classroom. These things are important, but it's really your work with class that has helped to remind us and show us and demonstrate the power that interactions have on supporting learning and development. And so as we sort of move forward and start to talk about this next vision, it's really just an honor to talk about the second edition and to know that we might write some new words on a page of a class manual. It's really up to our partnerships with you to make those words matter for young kids. And that's just truly an honor. And I look forward to not just the next few months as we talk about this work, but watching you all do the magic that you do as you support interactions in the world around you. So let's talk about second edition. So this summer, we will launch the second edition. This has really been, comes at the end of lots and lots of listening to the field. Really, since we started, I joke that the first edition was published when my first was a newborn, and he is now 15. So I have a very clear mental track for how long we've been listening and understanding things that are working, but also some things that are a challenge in using class. And so with the second edition, we're really working to hold true to those pieces of the work that we know are working well, while also responding to some of the concerns and critiques and feedback that we've gotten over the course of the years. If you go to the next slide, as we've talked about this work, there's really sort of three pieces as we listened to you that we've heard loud and clear and that we are responding to. And the first is this idea of centering on equity. It is important to know to us at Teachstone, and I know to those of you who are joining us today, this isn't just a word, but it really is critical to think about when we say every child, when we say every educator, what does that mean? And what role can class play in helping to ensure that more children get access to the kinds of interactions they need? Class is never going to be the only tool we need to get us to that more equitable vision for every child, but I think you'll see the second edition is making some changes that are important on that front, and you'll get to hear more about that. We also knew that any tool is only impactful if we create access. So you'll hear about some exciting changes in class that make it easier to use class and provide it in ways that are easier for the field to adopt at broad scale. And finally, all of this matters because we want to create impact. Too often we hear people, teachers are just getting their class scores, and that's not what it's about. So we are really both expanding what we're measuring, but also thinking clearly about how can we make sure that the tools used in ways that are really centered around supporting educators in the work they do each day. So if you go to the next slide. As we've talked about this a little bit, and you are some of the first to hear in more detail about it, but people I think are excited and feel like we're being responsive, but certainly this is an open dialogue. So we look forward to hearing as you learn more what your reactions are, what your questions are. And again, we expect this to be the beginning of a conversation. To start out, I'm just going to talk really briefly about what won't change. One of the things that has come to be so important to the field is just the core structure of the class, having dimensions and indicators and behavioral markers. So that sort of structure will remain the same. For the most part, even the sort of dimensions themselves are staying the same. The indicators are broadly staying the same. That's really a language that has become helpful to the field. We will talk through how there are some changes to some of those elements, but for the most part, the sort of foundational knowledge that you have around class remains relevant, and we're just building on top of that. We're also trying to do this work in a way that really does build on existing investments. So you don't need to go throw out everything you've done with class over the past decade or 15 years. This is really just a set of enhancements that will help you grow on those investments. And really thinking deeply about making sure this integrates. So it's not just a new manual, but making sure we have all of the supports for training, for our train the trainers who go out and use the supports around the nation, so that this becomes a really integrated system that we're talking about. We do expect that some of these changes will help create more equitable and consistent class data, but these changes are not expected to lead to significant shifts in class scores, and that's something that we'll be talking more about in the months to come. All right, so what is this sort of class second edition? You'll hear a little bit more about this, but it's a new manual. It's actually a manual set. We've sort of divided up the manual to make it much easier for you to take just what you need into the classroom to do observations. An exciting new training experience, and the first new sort of supplemental measure we've ever released on class environments. So I am going to stop talking and turn it over to my team to tell you much more about class. And so I think I am turning it over to Grace. We go to the next slide. And though Grace might be new to Teachstone, fun fact about Grace is that when I went on maternity leave the first time before the class manual was published, it was Grace who was working right beside me on class at the University of Virginia. So she is new to Teachstone, definitely not new to class. And I'm excited to hear a little bit more from Grace.
Hey everyone, thank you, Bridget. And yeah, it's pretty exciting all these years later to be in this position. And I see all of the questions coming in and want to reassure you, as Bridget did, that we have answers to them, and we have plans to support each of you depending on who you are and what your journey looks like in this moment. And it's an exciting moment. So we're going to start off by actually just, I imagine most of you on the webinar have a sense of this, by giving you a sneak peek. So I'm going to leave this here for a moment. What I'd like you to do in the chat, you can see here on top is what language modeling looked like in terms of the indicators and behavioral markers from first edition. And at the bottom is class second edition. Please take a look and start to put in the chat, what are some differences that you noticed? What is standing out to you already? And this is just in terms of some of the words on the page. There's a lot more that we're going to talk about. But as we start to dig in here, what do you notice? Narration is a different word. Yep. Better explanations, fuller definitions, more clarity. They come in so quickly. I'm trying to read as quickly as you all can write. That's a challenging thing to do. Yep. So you all are seeing a lot and saying a lot. This is great. Let's keep it coming. You're just doing our jobs for us. Now this is exciting because you're noticing the specific ways in which the words have changed. We're going to talk through that and the intentionality behind it, what it's intended to do and how it's intended to support you and support the field and support children ultimately. And there are changes beyond just the words in the face pages as well, but what you're noticing is absolutely. So you see that open-ended questions has moved to open-ended prompts. So many of us who've used the tool for a long time recognize that in order to pull communication and language from kids, it's not always questions that we're using. In fact, sometimes it might be through a nonverbal or a tell me more. And showing that interest is actually what we're doing to pull communication from children. And we've known that. Those of us who've used this tool for a really long time know this, and what we're essentially doing here is trying to make sure that this is more clear to all of us and more clear to the field and represents better the myriad ways that quality shows up across contexts out there in the world where you all are doing your brilliant work. So thank you for everything you're putting in the chat. I'm excited to keep reading through all of it. So we're going to center, as Bridget noted, we can go to the next slide. Thanks, Gloria. The first big goal here with these enhancements is around equity. And so there are four big components of that. And Veronica and I are going to talk those through a little bit with you now before we hand off to Katie to talk through some of the other enhancements. So the four goals are as follows, and you saw some of that already just now in real time as you looked at just that simple comparison and language modeling. So when centering on equity, the first goal here has been around more equitable and inclusive definitions of interactions. What we hear about and understand quality looking like starts to shape our lens and our view of what quality is. And so it's really important that the ways in which we write about as well as display through videos, that we are really representing and maximizing the definitions of quality interactions and what they look like in many different contexts. So we have expanded definitions. We've expanded them to be more inclusive and equitable. We've also, in second edition, increased representation across different types of settings and learners and contexts, both in how you'll see some of this written about in the manual itself, as well as in our training and support materials. You'll also see that when it comes to observing across contexts, we recognize that observers need to have a sense of the context that they are in order to reduce, hopefully, the bias that they might be bringing into that space. And so there are a couple of ways that we're getting at that. One is to really introduce considerations for use across contexts so that we know how learning takes place in early childhood settings, and it looks a lot of different ways. So we're putting in more clear guidance for observers around a lot of contextualized examples of how this might be, as well as supporting explicitly folks to recognize and reduce bias both in their own lives and themselves, and then apply that to class observations. So we're going to talk through each of those a little bit more, starting with the example. So we're going to just dive a level deeper with language modeling that we already started. So again, the first goal here is that we have more equitable and inclusive definitions of interactions. And actually, Gloria, the next slide makes it even bigger because I imagine people are straining to see these words. So we're going to go even bigger there. So now, what is added here that was not on the previous slide is definitions for the indicators themselves. So you all might notice that the definition to language modeling is much fuller than it was. There's a real push for verbal and nonverbal to be more inclusive of all the ways that interactions look and that learners learn. And you can see that there are these detailed and much more meaningful definitions describing what each of those indicators really means. And so in first edition, we would get lost sometimes in the behavioral markers, and folks would use them as a checklist in a way that was not intended. And here we've really moved to a more holistic understanding of the concepts behind this, and you can see it show up here. So I'm going to leave this open for just a moment so folks can take a minute with the ways in which you see those shifts showing up on the examples or on the definitions as well.
Some folks have definitely noted the home language piece, and also I saw somebody comment about being a special educator and really appreciating the explicit call out of the nonverbal ways in which language and communication supports.
Excellent, and you'll see more of that in some of our other goals. So I will hand off to Veronica, who's going to talk through some of our other equity goals and how we've gone about that work in second edition.
Hello, everyone. So another one of the ways that we're centering equity is by increasing representation. We want to ensure that our examples and our exemplars, both the written examples, the images that we show, and the videos that we use, are representative of the diversity in communities, of the educators, of the children that are doing this hard work every single day. We want to make sure that educators feel seen. We want our tools and trainings and resources to be reflective of the excellence that's already existing in the field every single day, right? So we are also working to collaborate more with the field, with people with deep expertise, with individuals who have lived experiences, to ensure that our content is relatable and authentic. Next slide. We also are centering on equity enhancements by offering considerations for use of class across diverse contexts, because we know that there are core educator interactions that are beneficial for all children. At the same time, we recognize that these interactions are nuanced, right? And there may be ways that they look and sound different across individuals, cultures, and settings. We want to make sure that there's clarity, that although we're being more inclusive and ensuring that there's representation in our definitions and our descriptions and our exemplars, that the class is staying in its lane, in that it's not intended to be a measure of best practices for supporting children with disabilities. It's not a measure for capturing linguistically responsive practices. So although we are ensuring that there is this inclusivity in our definitions, in our examples, in the considerations, so that it is appropriate for use within these settings, we want to make sure that we are still respecting the depth that other tools and measures use to provide that information when observing in classrooms or measuring children's outcomes. And we want to make sure that we're pushing ourselves to see quality in more diverse and inclusive ways, and so that observers understand how these interactions may vary. We are providing equity considerations for settings that vary in cultural representation, that have linguistic variation, developmental variation, setting variations, for example, programs that are family childcare homes. So we are making efforts to ensure that when we're defining quality, when we are providing examples of what quality looks like, that it is inclusive of the quality and the interactions that are happening across these settings. And our manual, the observation training, and a supplemental series of observation supports is going to be available this fall, which it will be available at no additional cost to support observers to be ready to observe in these settings, to support them in understanding what might these variations look like in settings with dual language learners, with children with disabilities across these cultural contexts within family childcare homes, so that observers are prepared to observe equitably within these diverse settings.
Veronica, I just had to call out a great exchange that happened in the chat with somebody asking before you said it, that family childcare was included in this. And then I love it. It was Tessie Reagan. Thank you, Tessie, who said family childcare is included. I know, because they came to film in my program. So just a great example of how it is a collaborative effort. And thank you, Tessie, for letting us come and film.
Yes, and an exciting example of how we are, in fact, reaching out into the field, working with experts who have this lived experience to ensure that there is authenticity in what we are developing. Finally, we're incorporating supports for bias recognition and reduction in our everyday lives and in class observations. And we use this framework that's intended to be ongoing and iterative to support observers in first accepting that bias is real, bias is pervasive. It affects what we notice, what we don't notice, how we assess the effectiveness of interactions, and how we score. And supporting observers in applying specific strategies for recognizing and reducing bias in our everyday lives and in class observations. And again, these supports are going to be available in the second edition manual, in the enhanced observation training, and in the new observation support series, which are going to be supplemental trainings. All observers will have access to these at no additional cost. I've seen a lot of those questions in the chat as well. So this is something that we want to ensure that we're making accessible. And we are in the process of developing a tool that's going to provide guidance for observers to check their bias consistently well before observations in our daily lives, right before observations, during observations, and during coding, so that this is something that is constantly being used. So just some reminder questions, things to ask yourselves, reminders about the strategy, so that when you're going into these settings, you're going into these settings as much as possible, being aware of your bias, understanding how to check your bias, notice when they're happening, reduce it as much as possible, so that we can have observations and scores that are as equitable as possible. And now to my friend Katie.
Hello. So I'm going to talk about how this is going to help us increase access. So part of our goals beyond equity is also to make this easier to access and easier to implement. As Veronica just talked about, getting our supports out to you and making them accessible to all and for free. We are also really going to be focused on helping reduce our age level simplification. So we're really working on combining a pre-K to third tool. So you have one manual, one certification test, and one observation training for those that would be going through observation training, as well as make it easier to implement. So we're really focused on, we've pulled the manual apart into a reference guide and a field guide to take out. We're updating our observation score sheets, as well as updating our platform to really focus on those impactful classroom and program reports. Gloria, next. So as I just mentioned, we currently have a pre-K manual and a K3 manual. And fundamentally, the class tools are the same, just the examples and how we teach about it are different. So we are really focused on making this much more accessible to the field and supporting like the greater continuity from pre-K to third right now by allowing you to use the manual, observation training, and the tool all for those age levels. Go to next.
Katie, while we're going to the next one thing people always ask is if I'm just interested in pre-K. So I saw it on that slide, but can you answer the question? If I just want pre-K, do I have to also learn about K3?
No, if you are just want pre-K, we will continue with our pre-K only training, our pre-K only certification and supports. So we understand how heavy, like we love pre-K, and you do not have to expand upwards into the K third. But for those organizations who want to continue on the spectrum of using class into the younger age levels, like kindergarten and first grade, we are making it much, much simpler and easy.
Perfect. And the other question I see a ton of in the chat, although I know we have a lot, is just about infant toddler. So I'll try this one, and then Katie, please correct me if I'm wrong. So we are working on similar integrations across infant toddlers. You'll see in a moment, those are going to come out a little bit later. So the infant toddler will be packaged together. We'll work towards a singular certification on those as well. And for any of you joining us who are UE and secondary colleagues, we are also working to integrate. So we're going from 6 age levels ultimately to 3 age levels.
Yes. So in addition to our increased enhancements is we are working on updating our observation training. So in addition to talking about all the wonderful updates to class, really focused on making sure our videos have a wider representation. Our observation trainings, our first touches are always with a facilitator. We're really focusing on like this NICE coding process. I know many people out there may have heard about the NICE coding process, but really formalizing it so everyone is aware and everyone understands how to do the coding process when they're going into the classroom and such. And so it's standardized in the field. And also just, again, coming back to like our automated reports on our platform, like making sure that not only are we collecting the data, but really helping you understand how to use that data and giving you easy tools as coaches to take back to your teachers, or if you're a teacher, being able to like utilize the feedback that you're getting from your class observation. So for measuring for impact, we are also expanding our measurement tools and focus on some of that continuous quality improvement. So we want to, the observers are already in the classroom, so we want to make sure we're really focused on collecting the most important data that's in the classroom so that we can support the teachers, the coaches, and the administrators to drive that quality improvement. Or you can go to the next slide. But the ways that we are going to do that are through our class environment, which is a supplemental training, as was said, I think as we mentioned earlier, as well as through our activity setting. So as you can see, our activity setting items are really expanding upon some of those content and format items that we have now. So identifying, when was my teacher doing literacy? Was it during free play, transitions, small group? And really focusing on being able to collect those additional data points. And we'll talk about class environment in a little bit more detail here in a moment. But we also, while the observer is in the classroom, we've created this tool to that adds an additional 15 minutes to an observation to collect those elements of the environment that really support a teacher being able to have stronger interactions in the classroom. So for the class environment, to go in a little bit deeper, we will be releasing an infant toddler version as well as a pre-K version this fall. And the class environment is organized by the class domain. So for infant toddler, we have the emotional and behavior support domain, as well as engaged support for learning. So sightlines, for example, are incredibly important so that the teacher can see all the children in the classroom at all times. So as you can see in this example, we have the definition of sightlines and a 1 through 3 score for it. So the arrangements provide no clear sightlines. Some of the arrangements provide clear sightlines, and then all of the arrangements provide clear sightlines with examples underneath. And then as back to our equity conversation, we have considerations for FCC classrooms, as well as items that would focus on other diversity and inclusion items. And then finally, all of these items were intentionally picked for a reason. So as you can see at the bottom, we have the justification for why these items really matter for those interactions in a classroom. So when educators can easily observe all children from all areas of their childcare center, they can easily notice those children's verbal and nonverbal cues. So they're aware of those needs, which supports the teacher in being able to promptly and appropriate respond to them. Next, so this is so as I said, we're going to also have it for pre-K, and those will be just organized by the pre-K through 3rd class domain. So the emotional support, classroom organization, and instructional support. So space for child privacy is another example item that we have. And the reason why this item is important is all children need the privacy to work or play alone, concentrate or collect and refresh themselves before rejoining groups. So caregivers can more easily respond to their needs by offering them a space where they can safely have their privacy. So there are, for the pre-K tool, we have 29 items this way. And for our infant toddler tool, there will be 31. Go to next. So the power of class environment, as I was just, to sum it all up, is that with the environment and interactions, they really support those children outcomes to enable them to regulate, self-regulate, communicate, and think.
One of the things I see somebody asking a question about is the ECHRs, obviously another environmental tool. And our goal was really to create a synergistic way in which, without learning another tool or sort of doing a whole nother observation, we can measure those elements of the environment that are most critical to teaching and learning. So we're not measuring the depth of mulch outside. That might be important for a safety, but we're really honing in on those elements of the environment that are most critical to the work that teachers need to do to support learning.
Yes, thank you, Bridget. So the implementation of class environment, we will have a class environment observer training. So this will be online and asynchronous, and it will also come with a manual and score sheets for $75. And then we will provide teacher PD as well as coaching supports. We know that while it's important to collect this data, tying it back to CQI, and what we ultimately want is for teachers to be able to improve and strengthen those interactions. So they need to understand why it's important and what the observers would be looking at. And then in addition, providing coaches the supports to be able to have those conversations with teachers. So the measure for impact enhancements, we are also working on our platform and really providing information for our coaches, leaders, and teachers to use class in ways that best support their everyday work. So that includes bringing all of these data points that we just talked about, from our activity settings to the class tool and class environments, and really bringing that together to best paint a holistic picture of the classroom, but to also to use all those data points to support those that continuously quality improvement that we want to see. In addition to the indicator scoring and formalizing that, and that allows us to really provide concrete next steps and examples for teachers and coaches and administrators on areas of focus to make their decisions. And then finally, we are working on improved classroom and program reports. So as the class second edition refinements are clearly focused on the clarity, approachability of the language and addressing our known confusion and correcting potential harm. So this was a quote from one of our reviewers.
Just as you're leaning in, there are so many questions in both the chat and the Q&A. Don't worry, put them in the Q&A if you can, but if they're in the chat, we'll download that as well and make sure we answer them. Probably not in this 1 hour time, but certainly in the weeks to come. And there's a lot more information on the website.
Yes, and so what does this mean for you? As Bridget just mentioned, we have tons of information on our website, and we are working to update the website with hopefully answers to all of your questions that you have been putting into the chat. And we will be continuously adding more details and more information to our website to really support your questions and your implementation. And any questions that we don't get to today, we will take back, and if they're not on the website, we will absolutely be working to address those questions. And you can always reach out to our customer support or your sales representative. But ultimately, what does this mean for you is do what you already do. You've already been working to make those teacher-child interactions stronger. You've already been working on collecting this data and all those improvements. And this is really just to help support you down that path even more. So just keep going on, collecting your class data. And as we roll out these changes, you will be onboarded to the class second edition. We will be providing a transition training that will be completely online and asynchronous. So that will be completely free to observers, as well as helping our leaders and our coaches and our teachers understand what all of this means for them.
And Katie, I want to take a minute to unpack, because that's probably like the most frequently asked question. So I'm going to ask it to you. And then, so I love it. I'd have to go back up in the chat to see who asked this, but somebody's like, I literally just finished my training yesterday. What does that mean for me? So can you say, for currently certified class observers, like what does this transition mean for them?
For currently class certified observers, this summer we will be launching an asynchronous training. So what that means for you is go get your certification right now, learn class, do class, and just keep going. And then once the summer comes, we will have an online course for you to go through and really learn these differences and what that means for you to consider. But you do not need to move up your recertification period. If you're recertifying now, you will recertify next spring. So this is just really the goal is to make your life easier and provide all that clarity to you for your class observations.
Great. And then a follow-up question about the manual. So when you said $75, I think that was in reference to the environmental scale. So for $75, any certified observer gets the access to the environmental scales training and the paper version of the environmental scales manual. And it was a supplemental tool. You can use it, you cannot use it. If you do use it, it should just add about 15 minutes to your training. But tell me about this class second edition manual. What will that look like for currently certified observers?
Yes, so for currently certified observers, we will be providing you a print or a digital manual that will not be downloadable, but you'll have a digital view only manual this summer at no cost. And then we will also be providing a new manual for purchase, which will ironically also be $75. However, through your recertification process, we'll actually discount it down to $50. So we will be working with ways to provide you a physical manual for those that want it and your organizations, but we will also provide you a view only version online so you can take a look, understand what these changes are.
Perfect. There's many more questions, but I'll let you go through this and then we can see if there's more to get to.
So as I said, we are working on getting all of these questions up on the website. So please visit our website for more information. And hopefully that can also provide you clarity about all the nuts and bolts. We know how important that is to you and understanding how that impacts your daily lives. For the trainings, we are very focused on making the transition easy for trainees who are actually going through the Teach, Shown, Delivered pre-K observation or pre-K to third observation training between now and June 30th. We will provide a live virtual transition training at no cost in July. And for currently certified observers, we will have those online asynchronous supports that will be made available at no cost. So if you want to learn more about the updates specific to your role for your organization, please go to our website and there is a wealth of information. For those that are not taking an observation training with Teach, Shown between now and June 30th, we will be offering this facilitated transition training at a cost, but we will have that as an option as well for organizations who would prefer to have a facilitated version as opposed to that asynchronous online supports.
So the online training freely available to any currently certified observers. If people want an in-person version of that transition training available to anyone who gets trained between March 15th and the 30th. And if people do want a more sort of in-person or virtual delivery of that transition, that's also available, but would come at a cost because there's a sort of live person delivering that. But there is a sort of free or no cost option for folks who want to onboard to the tool to get the digital manual and the online training.
Yes.
Okay, great, thanks.
You're welcome. And then just our overall timeline, we know there has been a lot of questions about when all of this is being released and with infant toddler. So in July, we will be releasing our second edition changes for the pre-K third. This will include our observation training, our transition supports, and the manual set. In August, we'll be releasing our class environment for observers, and as well as updates to our data collection platform. So that'll include updates to collect the class second edition data and enhancements on the reporting side. And then in September, we will be launching the class environment pre-K, K, and infant toddler teacher supports and course. And then in 2023, we know what about our affiliates, what about infant toddler. So we will be quickly following up with the supports for our affiliate trainers. So you have the most up-to-date training and you can train directly on the class second edition in 2023, as well as we will be releasing the class second edition for the infant toddler observation and manual. And then Spanish, we know that is quite important. So we will also be following along with complete Spanish supports for our pre-K third observation training and the manual. And we could not fit infant toddler on here, but infant toddler will also be translated into Spanish with the manual and training.
Great, Katie. It does look like we have a little bit of time for some more questions. So I'll start with a few, and then if others have captured them in the busy conversation.
I have not been paying attention to the chat. So
yeah. So one of the questions is about just MMCI specifically, but lots of questions about what about some of our other PED. So I think one of the messages is if you are using any of Teachstone's professional development, coaching, or supports, those are still relevant. So there's no need to stop. And over the course of time, we will be looking to do similar enhancements across our sort of improvement suite of resources. But those aren't going to be immediately available. But the biggest, most important message to know is that what you're doing matters. And we will also be launching alongside the enhancements, more information for teachers so that they know and understand what the second edition is like for them. Because obviously we want to make sure that teachers know and understand the new tool and the ways in which it will impact their observations. Other questions that people saw that they feel like taking on, or Gloria, if you've categorized.
One thing I'll just add quickly, Bridget. So specifically, I'm seeing the comments, and this is so helpful to read everyone's comments, and just exciting that you're all out there engaging. So thank you. With Spanish translation, hearing you all very much on the need to have materials in Spanish for educators. We are prioritizing support materials for educators to explain all of these changes in Spanish, but the full manual translation and some of those other supports that are really for observers take a little bit longer. So that is accurate, but we are still recognizing that for your educators, absolutely getting a better look at the shifts, being able to have the transition support offered with some Spanish supports as well is top of mind for us. And so I just wanted to clarify that, even if we don't have the full manual completely in Spanish by July 1.
There was also a question regarding the environmental tool, whether it was supplemental, so not required, and that is true. So it's supplemental. You can use it in conjunction with class observation of interactions, but it's not something that is required to technically conduct a class observation.
Sorry, guys. I'm sort of sifting through all the questions and trying to find something that hasn't already been addressed.
There's a question about sort of a detailed list of the differences and improvements. So we will definitely have that. And as a part of this sort of bridge training that we're developing, that'll be a very clear resource that the field has so that you know what has changed, why it's changed, and any supports that you need to make sure that can be used in your work in the field.
I know this one's a hard one to give an exact answer to. So there are questions about, is it okay to continue to use the class as is? So if Bridget or Katie, if you want to maybe take a stab at answering.
Veronica, you don't want to answer it? Absolutely. So we know that these things don't turn on a dime, right? We are talking about the same dimensions of practice, the same indicators. What we are providing is enhancements. And many of the folks that have seen some of the enhancements and have worked to collaborate on them have said things like, oh, I always was thinking about that when I scored that particular dimension, but it wasn't represented in the manual. And it's so nice to actually now see it coming up. Or these questions about home language. Lots of questions we've gotten throughout the years about what do I do when I have a group of children who don't speak the language of instruction. So it really is about providing guidance around those common questions. But the core class that you've been using for so many years is certainly still relevant. We do hope and will support the field to transition to this new version because we think it is better for the field, better for kids, but it's not something that needs to change on a dime. And again, our customer-focused support supports are here for you to help you in your individual or as a program think through how you go through this transition in the way that works best for you.
Here's an interesting question. What do we do with all the materials that we've already purchased?
That is a great question. I think, again, if you're going to decide to not use the manual specifically, as a certified B Corp, we actually have a commitment to environmentalism. So we actually have pondered this question a little bit ourselves. So I don't know if I have an immediate response to it, but certainly many of the materials that you have will still be relevant, and those that become less relevant over time, certainly will think through supporting with a field a way to transition away from those materials.
Also,
Katie.
oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead, Veronica.
I was going to say there's some questions about, do I need to recertify before I can conduct observations for QRAS? And I think some of those questions and decisions will happen locally at the state level, at the QRAS level, and we'll have opportunities to have conversations and help to strategize with our national, state, local partners to think about how to ensure that this transition to class is smooth as well. So I know there are some questions about that.
And it is important to say that we will not require, that will not be a brand new certification that happens. So people will still be on their typical certification. If you got certified 3 months ago, your recertification window will open at its normal time. And so over time, we will probably change what's sitting inside the certification more, but that process of certification, there's not going to be something new or different that you need to recertify on.
2 clarification questions. One, can you print the digital manual? Katie, I think you already addressed this, but if you could just clarify. And then 2, is the environmental part required or optional?
So the manual will not be available for print or downloadable and printable. You'll either need to just use the digital copy on your computer or purchase a the print version. We will be providing the reference guide, which will go into the protocol as a free downloadable PDF, but that will not include the class tool, domain, dimension, and indicator updates. And for the class environment is completely optional. It is not a required part of class, but it is a supplement to your class observation if you choose.
I do see a lot of questions coming in about, will Head Start adopt these? Will my state adopt these? So I think it's important to say, those decisions really need to be made at the level of the organization. That said, for any of our key partners, the Office of Head Start, our states, we've been talking with them about this transition for a period of time. So I would look to your leaders in those organizations for more information, but certainly it has been really important for us to make sure that this plan that we had for the work was in sync and could work flexibly with the timelines needed across different state and federal agencies.
There's a question about, is this webinar going to be available for affiliate trainers? I think that the question there is, what should affiliate trainers expect with these enhancements and the rollout of this?
Great question. I can take that, and Katie, feel free to add. So we will, so our affiliates, as you all are certified observers, will get access to this sort of free additional training so that you can get up to speed on second edition yourselves. It will not be until really early in 2023 till we're ready to sort of get that new training out to the affiliate network. But everyone that you train between now and then will have immediate access to the same bridge training. So much more to come. And I imagine we will have a webinar like this, very specifically designed for our affiliate team and folks over the course of the coming weeks and months. So I think that's a high level vision of what we're doing to support our incredible affiliates who have helped get the word of class out there in the field. There was a question about, if we're not certified trainers, what does access look like? How do we learn about this tool? Katie, can you take that one?
So they're not certified trainers or observers?
Right. So for coaches, for teachers, how are we supporting the field more generally to learn about the second edition?
So in general, we're still working through our plans, but our website already has some great resources, and we will be providing supports like, I mean, as Bridget mentioned, like the observers will have that detail, like what does it mean from class first edition to second. We will be providing our coaches very similar type supports in the field so that they understand what these new what this new version looks like in their classroom, so they can continue to support their teachers in the field.
And similarly, the observation supports that are being developed, for example, around equity, although that they're focused and intended to be primarily for observers, there will be availability for leaders who are not certified observers to potentially join and get access to those at a small cost. So available to certified observers at no additional cost, those observation supports, and can be purchased by individuals who are not certified observers at a small cost to have access to the online trainings to just understand, the reducing bias, the one around observing in DLL settings, the ones that we're developing around observing in settings with children with disabilities, observing in family childcare homes. So there will be that availability as well.
One of the things as we wrap up, I just want to say is that we know change is hard. Certainly we in this organization have been feeling it. And quite frankly, I started writing down things that I wanted to change about the manual on like the day I sent it off 15 years ago. And we haven't made some of those changes because we're conscious of how hard change is and how much all of you have invested in class. But we got to a tipping point not very long ago where we realized that the impact of these changes and the ability to ensure that class was being used in ways that went further towards our collective mission to make sure every child is being supported, every educator has what they need to thrive. It was just a tipping point where we acknowledge the pain of change can be hard. We are here to support you. That doesn't mean it's always going to be easy, but we promise to sort of sit beside you and hope that you feel the same as we do, that the investments, hopefully mostly of time that you are making and learning about this new tool are worth it. As we center ourselves in the experiences that we want every young child to have when they walk into a classroom and have an educator who cares about them, who knows them, and who is there to support them. So just a deep sense of gratitude to all of you, and know that we are here beside you, and are excited to sort of see what you all do as you learn and understand about this tool. So thanks for joining us. Gloria, I don't know if you have any other sort of closing outs for us.
The last reminder that I would put out there is a lot of the answers to your questions are on our website, teachstone.com. There's a lot of work was done on building out on those pages and making sure we could answer as many questions as possible. So please make sure to check out that resource. But other than that, thank you for being with us today. That's all we've got for you. A reminder, this is being recorded. You will get the recording, you will get the slide deck, you will get other resources that we mentioned in about 24 hours. But until then, have a good day, everyone. And see you later. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.